Welcome to Disaffected. It's June 9th, 2024. This is the show where we talk about politics, culture, and relationships through a psychological lens. And I'm Joshua Slocum. Thanks for joining us. This week, we're learning about the details from a hearing in front of a House committee that took place in January. Anthony Fauci, former director of the National Institutes of Health, testified. But it's just this week that we've gotten the full transcript released. I haven't read the entire transcript. I've only read the parts that are being highlighted in the media and online by people I follow. The 6-foot distancing rule is what's grabbing the most attention. It's one of the most obvious nonsense rules that completely took over our lives during the alleged pandemic, so it's clear why people are focusing on it, and I'm going to return to that in a minute. But at first, it's necessary to be clear about what I'm saying. Some people, some viewers, some readers have become upset when I've said alleged pandemic. And they've decided that I'm what they call a denier. I can't prevent people from having that kind of reaction. And I notice that it often comes from people who say that they've had many relatives or friends who died. So for some people, their grief makes it very hard for them to hear any challenge to the narrative that they believe is real on a global scale or on a national scale. And they can end up thinking that that narrative means that other people are saying that their loved ones didn't die or that their deaths didn't matter. That's, of course, not what people like me are saying, but that is what people hear. That's unfortunate, but the difficulty is on that end. It's not on my end. For those who are able to hear this without taking that emotional stance, this is what I mean when I say there was an alleged pandemic. Number one, I'm not talking about the dictionary definition of a pandemic. That dictionary definition says an infectious disease that affects numerous people across several continents. Using only the dictionary definition, I recognize that something called a pandemic occurred. But I still call it alleged. Why? Number two, because we as a society were not using the term pandemic to mean only what the dictionary said. This really should be clear by now. We used it to mean a dire disease, much deadlier than normal, that was going to kill people in numbers that we had never seen before. It was going to be a bloodbath. What did Joe Biden call it? A winter of misery and illness or death? We used the term pandemic emotionally, not rationally. The moral and emotional weight carried by the word pandemic as we use it now is obvious to everybody. Everyone sees it. It was used to suspend constitutional rights to travel and to speak freely. It was used by state governors to issue illegal executive orders compelling people to wear masks or to be vaccinated against their will or to be arrested if they walked outdoors with anyone who was not a resident of their individual single-family home. Yes, that did happen. Right here in Vermont, Governor Phil Scott signed that illegal executive order. It's one of many in many states. In short, we talked about the kind of pandemic. We talked of the pandemic with the kind of fear that we associate with a real plague, like the Black Death of 1348. Yes, we did do that. All the media did it, and well more than half the country did it. We did not have that pandemic. If you want to insist that the dictionary definition is all that is meant, then you will need to start referring yearly and consistently to the common cold pandemic, the flu pandemic, and every other infectious disease that affects numerous people across several continents. You will now be required to call that a pandemic consistently. People aren't going to do that. Let's go to Anthony Fauci's statements that are causing such interest this week to see what everyone is upset about. Here's an excerpt of the hearings from the Daily Mail. Question from Congress. Do you recall when discussions regarding kind of the at least 6-foot threshold began? And then there's some crosstalk. Anthony Fauci. I don't recall. It sort of just appeared. I don't recall like a discussion of whether it should be 5 or 6 or whatever. It was just that 6 foot is, and then the questioner comes back in. Did you see any studies that supported 6 feet? Anthony Fauci. I was not aware of studies that, in fact, that would be a very difficult study to do. Next question. Do you recall reviewing any studies or data supporting masking for children? Anthony Fauci. You know, I might have, Mitch, but I don't recall specifically that I did. I might have. Question. There's been a lot of studies that have come out since the pandemic started, but specifically on this there have been significant on kind of like the learning loss and speech and development issues that have been associated with particularly young children wearing masks while they're growing up. They can't see their teacher talk and can't learn how to form words. Have you followed any of those studies? Anthony Fauci. No. But I believe there are a lot of conflicting studies, too, that there are those that say, yes, there is an impact, and there are those that say there's not. I think that's still up in the air. Okay. So from this transcript, we learned what all of us knew all along. The 6 foot rule was arbitrary. It was theater. It was chosen to give the government the ability to be seen to do something. Even though that something was as effective as wearing an amulet against the evil eye. Stores of all kinds put stickers on the floor for us to obey, showing us how to stand 6 feet apart. They painted arrows on the side of, on the floor, told us to go walk in only one direction down each aisle to stop the spread. Because respiratory viruses, of course, only travel in one direction. And I happen to know that at Price Chopper, it's going south on the ginger ale aisle. Banks closed their lobbies and made us wait outside to come in, one at a time, wearing face diapers. Police arrested people for walking outside or for sitting outside too close to another person. We learned from the Fauci hearing what we all already knew. The man is a liar and a grasping control freak. He is so profoundly narcissistic that he said that he himself was the science. He was partially responsible, at least, for the misery that turned our social, political, and economic lives upside down. The misery permanently shuttered thousands of businesses and cost at least hundreds of thousands of jobs. It gave us the worst inflation we've had since the late 70s and the early 80s, and we're still living with $6 eggs and, in my area, $4 a gallon gas and insurance premiums that are double what they were 5 years ago. 4 years later, stores are still understaffed with unreliable hours, missing products, and surly employees angry that they have to work for a living again. People are still angry at what was done to their lives, and they are right to be angry. Every day I talk to people who are still estranged from their families because they didn't get vaccinated. Consulting clients tell me weekly that their friendships and their family relationships have not mended. They were barred from coming home for Christmas because they wouldn't take a dangerous and unproven vaccine, and some of them are still barred from coming home from the very people who are sick from the vaccine, very likely. To a person, my clients and social contacts told me that their worldview shifted permanently from this experience. They no longer trust their families, they don't trust their friends or their neighbors. And why should they? We learned who, among our loved ones, would have answered the door to tell the good soldiers that we were hiding in the attic. That's no exaggeration, it's the plain truth. Everyone knows it. Here are some examples from people that I've spoken to in the past week. Number 1 here. B says, agreed, and because of this, my feelings towards society have fundamentally changed. I used to love people and going out, and now I can hardly stand going to the grocery store. People's reaction to COVID left a mark on me. Nicholas Woodfield said, and the damn people today saying, what's the big deal? It was just guidance. People quoted the guidance as if it were law, gospel even. Everyone got to finger point at the guidance to excuse their tyranny and abuse. And he's talking about regular people, not Anthony Fauci, people around us. Justin McDonald said, I got turned down by multiple therapists in the winter of 2021 for not being vaccinated, the only time in my life that I really needed help. I cannot forgive the profession for that. Dissonance THX says, the biggest fear I had during COVID was the compliance that most people engaged in. They all went along with it around us. I did put a mask on in stores to get food for my family. We did a summer 2020 road trip, and it was refreshing to see people out west ignoring the whole thing. American Gidget said, I've cried again this week over the thought that I almost lost everything for taking a stand. I refused to mask. I publicly spoke against it. I refused the jab for my whole family, and my husband was angry about it for a long time. I almost lost my job. Half of my family disowned me. And Tape Drone said, my parents said they would never see me again. I had one jab only, and I'm glad I stopped there because it did enough damage by itself. If I'd gone for the full bioweapon fiesta, I probably wouldn't be here today. I'm still wondering why we haven't hung the people responsible. So when I see countless people online, as I have this week, railing against Anthony Fauci, railing against Trump for not firing him, railing against Biden for everything he did to immiserate us, I understand that. These people should be put on trial for crimes against humanity, but they won't be. And that's intensely frustrating. What I'm not seeing, though, is very much acknowledgement of the other responsible actors in this mess, and that is us. Kevin and I started this show to help people see that the kinds of psychological abuse that happen in the home have metastasized into the greater world. Most of you know that I grew up in a home with a violent stepfather and an unstable mother. You know that, like it is for millions, that permanently damaged me and my brother and sister. Narcissism in the home is deadly, and it's deadly in society too. But so is our reaction to narcissistic abuse. Children cannot escape a narcissistic parent, but adults have a lot more room to maneuver. It took me until 41 years old to realize that I was keeping myself a slave to a mother who mistreated and exploited her children. I was choosing to stay there. I was choosing to blame everything outside of me for this misfortune, everything but my own decisions. But the truth was that only I could decide to walk away from that abuse. When I realized that, and when I got over the ego bruise that came with waking up to my own complicity and my own inadequacy, that's what I did. I said no and I walked away. Everyone is focusing on Anthony Fauci, and he is indeed a villain, but I want to talk about the millions of my fellow Americans. We collectively allowed this to happen, and in fact, in some ways, we made this happen. And you know what? I know that some people are going to come back and say, not me, stop saying we. No, I won't. Because no matter what I say, somebody on the other side who's emotionally bruised by this will take issue with it. So I'm just going to say it the way it seems to me. We buckled under, and we became the enforcers for the government and the media. The majority of the American public is responsible for the state that we are in today. Fauci could not have done what he did without this country complying and punishing their own families and colleagues and friends on behalf of the government. Everyone's got an excuse for why they buckled under to the alleged but not real pandemic. Everyone's saying, we didn't know. No. No. It's nothing to do with what we knew and didn't know. It's to do with our lack of moral courage, our obedience to unconstitutional authority. We didn't know it wouldn't be dangerous. It would not have been okay to abrogate American citizens' constitutional rights, even if COVID had been as deadly as they said. That is the point. Don't tell me about we didn't know. There was no lack of knowledge. There was a lack of character and moral fiber. To look at this optimistically, I hope that this was the earth-shattering lesson for millions of people that they needed to permanently change their view of their own responsibilities and of what they're going to tolerate from other people. I hope it has made people more self-confident, more defiant, but only time will tell. In a fundamental sense, there are no single villains and heroes in this mess. There's only us, all of us. We will either take responsibility for our lives and say no to governments and media that are taking control of our lives, or we will continue to be enslaved by them. They're not going to give us freedom. We have to take it. In college during the 1990s, I was introduced to the anthropological concept of moral relativism. This was the view in anthropology that cultures should be studied on their own terms to understand them without bringing in contemporary or ethnocentric judgments. We weren't supposed to bring value judgments to the practices of this tribe or that culture that we were looking at. Like most ideas that have a reasonable place in an academic field, moral relativism busted out of the academy wall like the Kool-Aid man. Years ago, my therapist observed that the widespread public adoption of moral relativism, in the West particularly, is why we are now mutilating children and calling that loving care. And it's why we've substituted the gratification of hedonistic desires for virtuous behavior. Moral relativism has taken over the mind of the West. It's in our court system, it's in our public conversation, in the way we relate to our families, our friends, our neighbors. One of the worst social insults that we use against other people is to call them judgmental. Notice what a magic spell this is. We've been convinced that the most fundamental act of the human brain, judgment, deciding yes or no, safe or unsafe, praiseworthy or shameful, that is a sin. That's an act of aggression. It's a moral sin. It's completely deranged. But we believe it, and we enforce it on each other. Let's look at some news from Spain about moral relativism. This is from the Daily Mail. Headline, Gypsy, 20, who raped 12-year-old girl and left her pregnant with twins, is acquitted by Spanish court because their, quote, relationship is, quote, part of the cultural reality of their community. Let's get some details. Quote, a Spanish court has acquitted a man who raped a 12-year-old girl after it ruled that their relations were just part of Romani culture. On Tuesday, the court in Ciudad Real in central Spain took into account the socio-cultural context of the gypsy ethnic group to reduce the sentence for sexual assault and abuse of a minor by a 20-year-old man. This resulted in the perpetrator, who left his 12-year-old victim pregnant with twins, being acquitted. Next quote. The ruling held that the relationship was, quote, always consensual within the framework of a romantic relationship, adding that the two were, quote, close in age and maturity. The girl was first found to be pregnant after an examination by a doctor who alerted the authorities, leading to the man's arrest. Prosecutors had asked for a sentence of 11 years, but the court ruled to acquit. Is this what we want? Because I have no doubt similar outcomes will start happening in U.S. courts. If they haven't already, they might have. After all, morals are relative, right? We can only know that something is good or bad by asking everyone else around us if it's good or bad, particularly in authority, like Anthony Fauci. And when we find out what's good and what's bad, we're good boys and girls, and we don't have any responsibility for our decision-making, right? That's what we've decided. That's what we have. We can't know that raping a child is bad on our own. How could we know that? This is the great lie of leftism, that it cares, that it's humanitarian. It doesn't even recognize human nature. A 12-year-old girl becomes an anonymous cog in a cultural machine, not a human being with normal interests and the desire to be safe from predation. A little closer to home, here's a different version of moral relativism in the Vermont foster care system. This is from an interview with the Daily Signal with two Vermont couples. Can we roll that, please, Kevin?
Vermont is facing a foster parent shortage. There are many kids that need somewhere to live and not enough licensed families to take them in. And yet, despite this shortage, two families were recently told that they're unfit to take in Vermont's children.
Okay, So you can probably guess what's coming up here. You can probably guess what qualities these two couples have that make them unfit. So write your answer down. You don't have to write your answer down. It's not like I'm going to give you a prize or anything. We don't have budget for it. Let's actually roll the next clip, please, Kevin.
We had gotten a call from the DCF office asking us if we would take in a new baby that was about to be born.
As we were getting ready to say yes to this child, we got an email in with new LGBTQ plus regulation.
We got an email that's like one last thing, we've got to send you this questionnaire. One of the questions was asking, on a scale of 1 to 5, how accepting and supporting would you be of an LGBT foster child?
They said that all foster families, regardless if you are going to have an LGBTQ plus child, must be willing to affirm any gender identity, any sexual orientation. That was an absolute requirement for licensings. So after we made it plain to the department we could not abide by these new regulations, we got a phone call. And in that phone call, we were asked things like, could we use inaccurate pronouns? Would we take a child to a pride parade? I said, no, we just cannot go against our faith. We cannot do things like that.
So because you hold Christian beliefs and you're potentially not willing to take them to pride parades or use preferred pronouns, you are unfit to be foster parents.
Yeah, that's what the state had identified.
Imagine that. Imagine a state child care worker grilling parents to ask them if they'd be willing to take a child to a pride parade. Why is the state invested in getting parents to take children to sexually inappropriate political events? Why is the state interested in enforcing psychological abuse on children in the care system? Lying to them about who they are. I know many people have gotten used to this, but let's get unused to it because it's insane. And it happened just yesterday. That's what I can't get over about so much of this stuff. These things, culturally speaking, happened literally overnight in our culture. And almost everyone fell in line. It was so easy. We were so soft. We are not the people we've told ourselves that we are for a long time in this country. You know what? And it's not just insane for Christians. It's insane for everyone. No normal person, regardless of religion, ever thought that this kind of thing, the kind of thing that we see in these pride parades, should ever be allowed for children. No one thought that. Let alone did we predict that it would be enforced by the state as a condition of giving a lost child a loving home. We have one more clip from this. Listen to some of the details these families went through.
The email specifically said things like, you must affirm regardless of your beliefs. And, I think it became very clear to me that as a pastor, these are places I just can't go. I mean, I can't get up now in the pulpit and preach on certain subjects. I can't read Bible verses if I have my foster child with me because it's going to conflict possibly with the department's policy.
Now, Katie, you had an experience in your childhood with gender dysphoria, right?
I desperately wanted to be a boy. I have a core memory of going to a yard sale with my dad, and there was a model car, and I really wanted it. And so the guy came over, the homeowner said, I think every little boy should have a model car. Here I am, thrilled that the guy mistook me for a boy. Then my dad said something that stuck with me. He said, she's a girl, but yeah, I think she should have the model car too. I remember feeling secure on firm foundation. My parents loved me and let me like the things I liked, never lied to me about who I was, and never encouraged me to hate my own body.
Now they're suing Vermont's Department of Children and Families, represented by Alliance Defending Freedom.
This lawsuit is a challenge to the new regulations dealing with gender identity in Vermont. The regulation requires that everyone who has a foster license holistically affirm a hypothetical child's gender identity. They are asking couples questions like, will you use male pronouns for a female child? And will you take a child to a pride parade? These are actions that involve speech. These are actions that violate our clients' constitutional rights because they violate their religious beliefs, and the state cannot require them to go against their religious beliefs.
You know, did you hear that mom talk about, well, she told the truth about what we call gender dysphoria. Listen to what her father did to assure her that it was okay to be a girl and like boy toys. Look at the foundation that gave her, that let her live in reality and feel like there was nothing defective about her, because there was nothing defective about her. These are the kinds of loving parents that we hope kids will have. It's the kind of stable parenting I wish I had had. But the state sees this as evil. They want children unstable, uncertain, confused, malleable, abusable, and usable for the state's political ends. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but we wish these families the best of luck. All right, we're coming up on a break here, and we'd like to ask for your help and your support. We don't have advertisers yet, but we have you. You want to help us out, loyal audience? Real easy to make a one-off donation. Just go to disaffected.com and click on Support Us. You can throw in $3, $5, $100. It's all great. Do you want to be a more consistent supporter and a monthly subscriber with access to our Discord, recording of our audio-only episodes? We'd love to have you in there. Just go to either Substack, disaffectedpod.substack.com, or to subscribestar.com/disaffected. We'll see you after the break.
Disaffected is now streaming on X. Come with us each Sunday and dare to notice reality. You can find us on X at disaffectedpod.
Do you get something from Disaffected you don't find anywhere else? Well, you can help produce the show. Supporting members get access to our private Discord chat server, meetups, and audio episode recording sessions with guests. Sign up at disaffectedpod.substack.com or at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Welcome back. You know, we punish politicians for what we call flip-flopping. And it's true that many of them change their positions on a dime just to get votes, but it's also true that people can change their minds with experience. And Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania looks like one of those people. Listen to this exchange he had recently with his CNN host.
President in this situation seems to be more coming from very safe and blue, very kinds of places. Now, in Pennsylvania, the border security is an important issue, and we do all believe that we should have a secure border. And I never thought it was unreasonable for any Democrat to want to make our border more secure.
I want to ask you personally about your own sort of journey, as the kids say. Some progressives have criticized you for being a different senator than you suggested you would be when you were a candidate for Senate. What do you say to that?
Well, I wasn't. I was very clear for saying that for years I'm not a progressive, and I just identified myself as just a regular Democrat. So it really wasn't any new news. Now, 8 years ago, I was a progressive. But the situation's changed, and I've been very clear that I didn't leave that label. That label left me, and I think it's much more important to be focusing on Donald Trump instead of,
So he used to be a progressive, but he's not one anymore. You know, 8 years ago, I used to be a progressive too. Fetterman's breaking with the party on immigration and Israel. Well, people disagree on things. Yeah, I heard what he said about Donald Trump. And it does seem like Trump obsession still has a hold of him. What can you do? Not much. But we should recognize that politicians can genuinely change their minds and that we don't have to agree with each of them on every single issue. It does not have to be an entire package. You know, and while I think that Fetterman should have stepped aside from the Senate when he had his stroke, and then again when he had his bout with serious depression, he really should have stepped aside. But I'm glad to see that he appears to be recovering well, and I wish him well for that. Now, we told you several shows ago about what's called the Cass Review, a 400-page, 4-year investigation into how medicine in the United Kingdom has treated so-called transgender children. That review found that the evidence for any of these treatments, these alleged treatments, was very poor and mostly non-existent. It found that mentally ill kids and autistic kids were being told that they were the opposite sex and that was the genesis, the source of their unhappiness. And gender medicine was poisoning kids with puberty blockers and in some cases permanently mutilating them through surgery. Now, Britain woke up and almost immediately banned the practice of prescribing puberty blockers throughout the National Health Service, their socialized medicine scheme. But there was the problem of private practitioners. Well, it's not a problem in Britain anymore. The UK has now banned puberty blockers at private practice clinics, although it seems that it's only initially a 3-month ban. I could not get a definitive answer to this, so we'll have to see how that turns out. What I find interesting is the U.S. news coverage, because increasingly, alone among Western nations, the U.S. is still pretending that we can call child mutilation healthcare, and it's still pretending that only evil fascist fundagelical right-wingers want to protect children from psychiatric and surgical lunacy. Look at how an article in Yahoo News characterizes the fact that nearly half of the U.S. states have banned or severely restricted child gender medicine. And oh yes, it must be partisan because only the red states are doing this. Because the blue states still care enough to cut off little Jane's breasts. So this graphic, it's amazing to me. This is how it's headlined. Bans on gender-affirming care risk a chilling effect on physicians. It risks a chilling effect on physicians. That was important enough for them to highlight. That was the most important thing about this story for them to highlight. It was not important to highlight that gender medicine for kids guarantees mutilation and lifelong psychological problems. And they also call it restricting youth access to care. I can't say it without some version of the voice. Care. It's so disgusting. They say it this way to make you feel sympathetic about this, so that you'll hate those big meanies who don't want to cut up children's bodies. Those hateful bigots that won't lie to children and tell them that they're not the body they were born in. How much longer is this going to go on in U.S. conversation before we can have a reality-based conversation? I'm not sure it will ever happen. They're using the same emotional manipulation techniques that they use on the abortion issue. That's why it sounds so familiar. Restricting access, chilling effect on physicians. Sadly, this works on left-leaning people. It used to work on me. Now, news articles can make all of this sound very clinical and detached. But when you hear directly from some of the parents involved in doing this to their children, it hits different, as the kids say. Here's a post from what appears to be a Facebook group dedicated to talking about past lives and reincarnation. Quote, "My 8-year-old son was my husband in several past lifetimes. This has been confirmed not only by him, since he remembers his past, but also by 2 mediums. Is it 2 mediums or 2 media? He treats me with a love I've never known, cares for me when I'm sick, attends to and intuits my every need, leaves me love notes by my bed, talks about the devastation he felt when I died, carries my groceries, opens the door for me. The list goes on, like you could never even imagine or expect an adult partner to act that way. He chose to come into this life as transgender, born female, and he's aware that I am here to help him navigate his upcoming challenges. He's always telling me how appreciative he is that he has such a strong protector. It's truly a very intense soul connection." Do I believe this is real? Yeah, I'd put money on it. Can't guarantee it for sure, but absolutely plausible. In no way unbelievable in 2024. This is severe cluster B personality pathology. This woman has no genuine empathic connection to her daughter. And let me remind you, because it's confusing, she has a daughter, a female child, who's 8 years old, that she's calling her son, who is now her husband, although she says in a past life. This is the parentification that I've talked about. Her daughter is an object. She's a tool. She puts the responsibility, this woman does, for her derangement onto her daughter, claiming that her daughter chose to be born into the world as transgender, to be mommy's new husband, to be mommy's knight in shining armor. You will adapt to service us. I was parentified and turned into a surrogate husband for my mother, as so many children of cluster Bs are. But at least she didn't tell me I was the wrong sex and that I slept with her in a past life. If you're about to think, they should call Child and Family Services, well, think back to what we showed you a little bit earlier. Remember what you know about the child welfare authorities. They are the villains that will have your child into the meat grinder faster than you can say loss of parental rights. Yeah, this week, I've been talking a lot with people online about how much I dislike going out in public anymore. I don't like having to deal with employees in stores and drivers on the road. It's so much more stressful than it used to be. And, you know, everyone got somewhat zombified over the past 4 years, but the worst of it seems to me, has hit the youngest generation, the young adults now in their late teens and going to college. And to describe many of them as rude is both too much and not enough. Sure, they won't look at you, they can't answer simple questions, they communicate hostility if you ask them for actual service in a store. But they don't even appear to know what the concepts of manners and civility are. I think they don't think they're real. But the competency crisis is absolutely real. And it's not just competence to fix a pipe or to stock a shelf or to work with a spreadsheet, although it is all of those things. We're having a competency crisis over the simple act of being a human. I used to get told a lot more than I do now that I was exaggerating this, that I just didn't understand young people, and I was just getting old and cranky. I'm getting old and cranky, but I'm not just old and cranky. I still get some of it, but not nearly as much as I used to, because other actual adults are seeing the same thing, and I guess they got tired of insisting that their eyes were lying to them. I'm sorry for the terrible screenshot, but I had to grab this. Look at the results of a recent survey of employers. Intelligent.com asked them about their experience of hiring recent college graduates. So this is a graphic from Fox News. During job interviews, employers say recent college graduates have, and then it gives percentages. 53% said these are the employers describing their recent college graduates that they've hired. 53% of employers said they struggle with eye contact. 50% said they ask for unreasonable compensation. 47% of employers said they dressed inappropriately. 27% of employers said they used inappropriate language. 21% of employers said that young people refused to turn on the camera during a virtual interview for the job. And 19% said they brought a parent to their interview. I mean, we know about helicopter parenting, but bringing mom or, it's mom, it's not dad. It's not dad, it's mom. Bringing mom to your job interview. These people should put me in HR. I'll tell you what, you ain't working for shit. All right. You may know Konstantin Kisin. He's the host of the podcast Trigonometry, and he's been holding a lot of public discussions and debates. His most recent brought together 4 people to debate the question of the Israel-Hamas war. 2 of the debate participants were pro-Israel, and 2 were what they would call pro-Palestinian. And the behavior of one of the Palestinian supporters on stage is a perfect example of how cluster B behaviors have been normalized on the left and normalized in public discourse. It's got everything. We're going to have refusal to answer a question, talking over other people, taking up the mic for 3 minutes, treating fellow conversants rudely, and then accusing your hosts of awful behavior that never happened because it was you who was behaving badly, and then throwing a tantrum and a microphone at the debate organizer in person. The debater in question is Miss Brianna Joy Gray. She worked for The Intercept and for The Hill until I think just yesterday or the day before, where she was fired. I'm not exactly sure why. I haven't looked into it yet. But she was also Bernie Sanders' former press secretary. I'm going to give you the ending before I give you the beginning. Lots of angry leftists are calling Konstantin Kisin a racist and misogynist at Brianna Gray's behest because of this tweet that she put out. She says, "This is the neutral moderator of a debate on Israel's genocide in Gaza. You simply cannot argue with racists. On the upside, they will always expose themselves." And she gives just a little bit of Konstantin's tweet at her, which said, "DEI Barbie is upset." Except that wasn't the whole tweet. This is the whole tweet. I'll read it to you. "DEI Barbie is upset. Imagine participating in a debate about Israel and Palestine. Imagine answering literally 0 of the questions you were asked. Imagine talking over everyone else and being disrespectful to fellow panelists and the moderator. Imagine storming off the stage afterwards, screaming that everyone is racist, telling the moderator, quote, 'I'm never doing this again,' and throwing the microphone at the debate organizer. Imagine then complaining online that your abject failure is the fault of the organizers, moderator, and crowd." Horse of a different color, no? I'm going to give you about 3 minutes of Brianna Joy Gray on stage so that you can judge for yourself.
Which is blatantly going to fail, but I'm going to try anyway, which is ask every single one of you to answer that question very briefly, which is how many civilian casualties do you think there have been in Gaza and how many Hamas fighters have been killed? And we'll just go around everybody and give me a figure.
I think it's really important to note that Israel has accepted and verified Hamas's numbers routinely over years and years and years. And at no point has the Hamas numbers that have come out in the immediate wake of an incident been revised. Has there been a determination that those numbers were an estimation so that Israel would have to recalibrate its choice to rely on those numbers? When we're talking about, remember we're talking about Hamas numbers.
Just give me the numbers though. Just give me the number.
Hamas is the government. I did a really short opening, so I hope you don't mind if I...
Fine.
Hamas is the government of Gaza. So in Gaza, the person who picks up your trash from outside of your house is Hamas. The person who runs the hospital and gives you your, childhood vaccines or whatever is Hamas. Literally everybody is Hamas. And the Hamas Health Ministry, which has been keeping these numbers, has been relied upon by international organizations and by Israel up until this point, at which it is, I think, inconvenient for Israel to accept these numbers that are very, very high. These numbers have been stuck at about 34,000 for over a month now because everyone who used to do the counting in the Hamas Health Ministry is dead. The hospitals have all been destroyed. Every hospital in Gaza has been destroyed, partly because of mythology, like the idea that a Hamas headquarters was under Al-Shifa Hospital, which was disproven roundly. It absolutely was.
Brianna, you're entitled to your opinion, but not your own facts.
It was. There was no Hamas headquarters under Al-Shifa Hospital.
Brianna, so
there hasn't been, and there continues not to be.
Let me.
But the consequence
let me just
of that,
ask this again, because I asked you about fighters. I asked you about Hamas fighters. So 34,000 total.
What we know is
how many fighters?
3/4 of those are women and children.
So how many of those are fighters?
So even if all of the men were Hamas, which we know there aren't, because, for example, just a month ago, we saw the drone footage of an IDF drone tracking and shooting 4 Palestinian children as they were going through the rubble of their own house. I mean, there's innumerable examples of seeing people who are not Hamas being killed.
Okay.
Israel obviously notoriously shot 3 of its own hostages that were stripped down nude trying to get free. So even if you count whatever the remaining 3/4 as being Hamas, it still remains the case that 3/4 of the 34,000 are women and children.
So how many would you say are fighters?
I rely on the same numbers that everybody else does. I'm saying even worst case scenario.
So what are those numbers?
You're asking me to do math? What's one quarter of 34?
Well, I don't think all the men who've been killed are
8,000 or
okay.
so.
Okay. That wasn't really an answer to a question. That was a political sermon. That's what she intended to do, and that's what she did. Are you asking me to do math? She wasn't actually expecting to have to answer the question that Konstantin repeatedly asked her. Very politely. We've got one more clip. It's not a full 3 minutes, but I want you to see this interaction between Ms. Gray and her fellow conversants on the stage.
That Israel's response to October 7th would have been to build Gaza an airport. Is that right?
Is that what you think I just said? You have some serious listening comprehension issues, Eli, if you think that that's what I just said.
Well, no, I'm trying to get it. You just gave a long,
I can slow it down for you and say it again if you're struggling to understand, Eli. Would you like me to say it for you again?
Anything, Brianna. Okay. I'm asking you. You were asked what Israel should have done, and you gave a long soliloquy about how Gaza doesn't have infrastructure.
As the moderator,
so I'm asking,
I do agree
is that
with
what
this,
you think Israel should have done in response
you
to
haven't
October
answered
7th?
my question, which is fine.
The right of return. Do you not know what the right of return is?
In response,
I know all about the right of return.
Hold on, let me do my job. Yeah. So, in response to October 7th, Israel should have instituted the right of return.
I mean, long before October 7th.
No, but after October 7th.
There's going to be no peace until Palestinians have been granted the right of return. Yes, that's right.
We're talking about this particular war, and we're asking if it's a just war.
Yeah, look, I think there's a world in which people kind of intrinsically understand that kind of Old Testament eye for an eye sensibility.
I'm going to put this all to them.
Sure.
I'm asking you, after October 7th, what should Israel have done? It's a fair question.
I'm literally answering.
You have not answered my question.
Like I was saying, I think intrinsically there's an idea that there's an eye for an eye situation after October 7th immediately, where a certain number of people needed to be killed, Hamas needed to be targeted, there needed to be a reaction, right? I can understand that. But in the first week of the siege after October 7th, more bombs were dropped on Gaza, a 25-mile strip by 5 miles wide, than were dropped on Afghanistan in 1 year of war.
Okay, so, let me try a different way. Do you agree with Jay?
And very quickly, the number of Palestinians that have been killed doubled, tripled, quadrupled the number that had been killed on October 7th. So the question is, much less than what's been done. Almost immediately, there was a retribution in a kind of Old Testament way. And everything beyond that, I see very little moral justification for.
That, that's kind of how she was throughout the whole thing. She didn't answer the questions. She was rude and dishonest to her conversational partners and to the moderator. And I have no trouble believing that she pitched a fit and threw a microphone at the organizer at the end. I mean, she went right on Twitter and called Konstantin Kisin a lying racist and a lying Zionist, I think. DEI Barbie indeed. All right. Do you need to talk to somebody about someone who's behaving in a cluster B fashion in your family, at your job, at your workplace, at college? You can talk to me. Visit joshuaslocum.net. I offer 1 hour coaching and consulting for people who want to talk about abusive situations, game out how they're going to exit from them, try to figure out if they can erect some boundaries with people that they're having a hard time with. I would love to be able to help you if I can. Remember that returning clients and disaffected supporters, monthly subscribers, get a discount. So look me up at joshuaslocum.net. And if you don't see a time slot that works for you, send me an email. Propose another time. I'll absolutely accommodate weekends and evenings if I have the time to do that. So if you don't see what you're looking for, send me a message. We're going to take a break. A couple of housekeeping items. We are now streaming on Twitter as well. The show's coming out on Twitter/X at 9 p.m. on Sundays. And also, so make sure you follow us. We are at Disaffected Pod. Please follow us. We do have live chat on Twitter as well. Also, if you are a Rumble viewer, thank you very, very much. We're moving the date. We're going to get everything standardized. Rumble is going to stream 9 p.m. Sundays. So on Sundays, you're going to have the choice of watching us on X, watching us on Rumble, or watching us on YouTube. Come back, and we're going to do Potpourri du Moquerie.
Disaffected is now streaming on X. Come with us each Sunday and dare to notice reality. You can find us on X at DisaffectedPod.
Do you get something from Disaffected you don't find anywhere else? Well, you can help produce the show. Supporting members get access to our private Discord chat server, meetups, and audio episode recording sessions with guests. Sign up at disaffectedpod.substack.com or at subscribestar.com/disaffected. It is time once again for Potpourri du Moquerie, where we roast the skin off everyone. And there's so much to mock this week, so allons-y! First up, this.
Were there last night as police led 26-year-old Kiara Lee to a waiting van, her feet shackled. She faces a list of charges, including possession of drugs and corruption of minors. Investigators say she used her position as a crossing guard at an intersection near Penwood's Middle School to get close to kids and gave at least one child edible marijuana.
She's supposed to be, as you said, a crossing guard protecting children. Instead, she's using that position to get to know children and then sharing harmful products.
The Delaware County District Attorney says they are looking to see if more kids got drugs from Lee.
On the second time I heard this, I heard that she's going to be charged with possession. She should be. You know, she looks like the Dollar General version of that Orphan movie actress. No, not that one. Next graphic, Kevin. Yes, her. All right. Next up, not historic, histrionic, affluent Western female liberals have a cry-in at a public meeting over painting queer colors on crosswalks.
I want to say that every crosswalk, every rainbow, every flag matters. I think it's actually life-saving.
Just being able to have this small token that safe places exist in the world can be a lifesaver.
Something like painting a crosswalk is just, sorry, I'm trying not to cry. It's a small token of letting our son know that this town where we chose to live and raise our kids is a safe place for his family.
I am.
Sorry.
Take your time.
And I will say that when she puts a rainbow on her body and walks around, it's powerful and it matters. So, sorry.
Oh my God. See, look, parentification right here. This is parentification.
And she's also been asked to read a poem at the painting, the dedication of the crosswalk.
As a woman married to a man, I have better access not just to health care, but to better housing, employment, mental health, education, and the media.
You know, this entire issue is like toasted white bread, which is just a vehicle for melted butter. Trans Kids is a vehicle for the public narcissistic glorification of liberal leftist white women. I'm with that bored kid in the background. Do you see him? He's all like, oh my God, when can we go home? All right, let's go back 4 years to the beginning of the alleged pandemic when everyone was worshiping St. George Floyd.
My pussy matters! Black Lives Matter! My pussy matters! Have fun paying for all of this! Black Lives Matter! My pussy matters! Have a great time, ma'am! Black Lives Matter! My pussy matters!
You make no sense. What is wrong with you?
Her people don't matter, but her fucking pussy matters! Black Lives don't matter! Her fucking pussy matters!
My pussy matters! What the hell is she doing? Bowling for sniz? I mean, oh my God, What is it? I mean, of course it's Walmart, but why? Why does this always happen in a Walmart? I was going to tell you a story, but it's not actually that interesting, so forget it. We'll just move right along. The brave and commendable Chris Elston, also known as Billboard Chris, travels the world wearing a sandwich board with a message on it that transing children is child abuse. He's been beaten, he's had his arm broken, he's been spit on, and otherwise lovingly engaged with by all of these charming kitty lovers. And I just love seeing someone caught in their own stupidity.
Gender is sort of like a socially constructed thing that is being deconstructed at the moment.
So if a boy likes to play with dolls, does that give him a female gender?
No, not at all.
So what gives him a female gender?
If he feels like he wants to be a woman.
What does it mean to be a woman?
It means if a man wants to identify as a woman, he's allowed to. That's what I mean. Gender, like.
So what's a woman then?
It's someone who feels like they want to be a woman.
But a woman is not just a feeling.
Why does it need to have a cookie cutter definition? Older people like you guys, you can't grasp the idea.
Excuse me, I'm quite young.
All right, buddy.
I identify as 19.
Why can't I identify as a black person, but I can identify as a woman?
See, this is what I mean. Why is it harmful that people want to identify as another gender?
How does it harm you that I want to identify as 19?
It doesn't harm me.
Okay, so then why don't you accept it?
I didn't say I didn't accept it.
Do you accept that I'm 19?
If you want to say that, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't affect me.
So will you take back your statement where you said that I was an old man?
What?
It's so good. Now, if you've been waiting for the wokest military ever for this Pride Month, these people, whoever the hell they are, have you covered.
It's Pride Month Cucks. Do you know what that means? Here at Lockheed Raytheon, we are locked and loaded to serve cunt in every color of the rainbow. Whether it's our classic Leather Daddy surface-to-air missile systems, lipstick lesbian F-69 fighter jets, or our new Stonewall drones, operated entirely by a staff of bisexual non-binary pilots from our secret underground bunker in the Castro district of San Francisco, the good gays over at Lockheed Raytheon have you covered from head to toe with the fiercest arms in all of NATO. Our clients will rest assured knowing that their homes were destroyed by ethically sourced, non-GMO munitions, each with their own uniquely assigned set of neo-pronouns. But before we can bring rainbow freedom to underserved communities far away, it all starts with a dream. This is Sock. They're our Portland-based Vice President of Research and Development.
Thank you, Jojo. At Lockheed Raytheon, every June, we are proud to show off what real American progress looks like. That's why I'm excited to announce our new laser-guided tactical glitter bombs. Before hitting their target, they play an eclectic selection of queer hits like Born This Way by Lady Gaga and Girls Like Girls by Haley Kiyoko, unleashing a storm of rainbow fury on any unsuspecting terrorist. At Lockheed Raytheon, our products put the sleigh in Slay Queen, but you have to act fast, because these deals are only available during the month of June. Don't miss out.
I hope operators are standing by. Now, if you're on a budget and you need to show your pride in a smaller way, try this family's method.
We had a happy first Pride, didn't we, boys? Not first Pride. First Pride is me as trans, but they had a happy Pride, right?
Yeah.
Yeah? They're tired. Very happy Pride.
Yes, happy Pride. Woo.
I'm gonna let you all know because there's seem to be some people that don't like us celebrating Pride. Honey, I'm proud of trans women and I have to be proud because often, more times than not, I get ridiculed for being who I am. And I'm gonna be proud. Today is our Pride Festival, and yes, our content centered around that. You don't have to announce you're leaving either.
Look at Pete. Trying to show off his,
Hi, Petey.
Yeah.
You like that fan?
He loves it.
So we're gonna be proud and loud. We're gonna take up space.
Yes,
That
we
makes
are.
you feel uncomfortable. Like I said, no need to announce you're leaving. Just leave, please.
I feel
Because obviously you're not gonna have a good time.
Yeah, well, you taking up space by spilling into the seat next to me definitely makes me uncomfortable, but so does your child abuse, and this is Potpourri, so let's just move on. Celebrating Pride Month doesn't have to be a big production, and you don't have to buy all new gear and pronouns. Sometimes the old traditional ways are the best, like this advice from my generation. Someone you know is gay, maybe even someone you love, call them a faggot. All right. We are going to wrap up by taking a look at how things are going in Cologne, Germany. I don't think they're having any current New Year's Eve rapes, but who knows? Those dedicated climate activists, they have showed up again to demonstrate to the world how very much they care. Take a look at them, and if you're just on audio, they have erected a scaffold. There are 3 of them, and they are all 3 standing with nooses around their necks on top of blocks of ice. Yeah. Does anyone have a bucket of salt? All right, that's the show. But as a reminder, if you watch us on Rumble, we are moving to Sunday nights at 9 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So there are 3 ways that you can watch us Sundays at 9. X or Twitter, follow @DisaffectedPod, Rumble, and YouTube. Thanks for watching and listening. We will see you next week.